Alright guys, we are back again with another video, and this time this is going to be more aimed at balanced Druid feedback for the developers and for the general community going from Battle for Azeroth in the Shadowlands based on what we have seen from beta. This is feedback that is mostly compiled by the Balanced Theory crafting community, spearheaded by mostly Bora, and I'm going to do my best to be able to help get their voices out. I'm going to leave a link down in the description where you can check out this Google document. Also, link to the post on the forums if you have any experience playing balanced Druid on the Shadowlands beta. Give your anecdotal experience. Talk about what you think could be improved. Just give it enough experience so that the devs can change a couple more things and move Moonkin from above average or good to great. And I hope that that's what was expressed here. I didn't want this video to be a downer. I actually think Moonkin is in a pretty good spot, and I'm looking forward to playing it. Again, this post is going to be primarily just to address high-end PvE gameplay, so Raid and Mythic Plus. So that is something to also mark down, that it is not designed for PvP in mind, because we do not claim to be just PvP experts. And yeah, basically that's it. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. All right, so let's actually start off with our single target and our multi-target damage and how these are both feeling. So starting off with single target damage, honestly, not that bad. It's in an okay spot pre-tuning. The rotation in of itself is not like the most engaging thing, and I think that comes down to Eclipse. But honestly, if it gets changed, I would be stoked. If it doesn't get changed, honestly, I could take it or leave it. The reason that it is a bit bland, though, for those who want to know, is because Eclipse management is largely inconsequential. Meaning that it doesn't matter if you are in Eclipses or outside of Eclipses, because you are going to get almost immediately right back into your Eclipse with 2 globals of delay. And so you really don't have a super big incentive on extending out Eclipse as much as you would like. And while it does give you slightly more astral power gained over the duration because of the haste buff that you gain by being in Eclipse, honestly, it doesn't even feel that much different. So it doesn't actually give you anything by being in Eclipse on single target. There's no gain, there's no loss. You don't notice a difference. And I think that that is poor in of itself, because it feels so unrewarding to be in Eclipse or outside of Eclipse that you don't really care. But at the same time, our single target is largely functional and serviceable, but it could be slightly better. And I think that that's how most people feel about it. Oh, moving on to our multi-target, our resource generation on AoE is just the worst. I think Balance may be the only multi-dot class that does not have a resource gain whenever you add additional targets, and thus we end up spending a significant portion of our time trying to apply single target Moonfires, because Stellar Drift is kind of meta right now. Stellar Drift versus Twin Moons, of course, that's going to always be a part of the decision, but having to spend so many globals to be able to apply Moonfires out to targets and not getting any resource gain back is a problem in of itself, and it slows down our rotation by a significant amount. Sure, there is an upside to this, like the level 54 leveling perk, where it extends out our dots by 4 seconds per time you press Starfall, is great, and it makes us refresh our dots with decreased frequency, but the ability to be able to gain astral power on AoE is severely limited, because stuff like Shooting Stars is not baseline, and it has diminishing returns on AoE, and then you just don't have any great passive generation while you're dotting up, so you're going to be really, really slow in of itself. This is part of the document. It reads, in an ideal world, we spend a portion of our time applying dots, placing a Starfall, and then Starfire should be our last priority. Dots do not do anything in the way of maintaining Eclipses, either through the resource generation or some form of extension, making it incredibly difficult to find optimal times to cast them, and I think that is just the perfect way of describing it. Basically, as it currently stands, you feel like Starfire and your Starfall are just the utmost of highest priority, and part of it's due to the fact that your astral power generation is so low that you really want to have one Starfall out at all times, that you just can't find times to press Moonfire. It shouldn't be like that. You should be able to find times to press Moonfire, and there should be increased times of generation inside of your kit. I went back and watched the videos of Legion Moonkin, and I watched like the lower Karazhan Opera portion where you would just like Sunfire then spam Starfall global over global. Same with Eye of Ashara Crabs, you'd Sunfire then spam Starfall global over global. And I kind of want to get back to that because that was some of the most fun that I've ever had with Balanced Druid. And I don't know if it should necessarily be that overtuned or like you shouldn't get that much astral power back, but you should be able to sustain your rotation while actively dotting, I think is more of the point that we're trying to make here. All right, so after talking about the problems with our single target and multi-target rotation, let's talk about our base abilities. So by and large, I would say that most base abilities have gotten better coming into this expansion. I think that the empowerment system being replaced with the Eclipse system is actually a significant gain. Starfall and Star Surge differentiation feels, it's in an okay spot. Moonfire and Sunfire are definitely in a worse spot, and basically you put them on the target and that's it. Like, you don't actually gain anything by dotting, and for a class that's supposed to be a multi-dot spec, it feels very punishing to dot. And I know I just got off of talking about it in the multi-target section, but I just really want to hammer into it again. In this document, it reads, for most classes, their dots are an integral part of their rotation. They provide additional resources apart from the initial application, or they interact directly in the rotation with some proc or buff of some sort. Moonkin is not that way. Moonkin is just a fire and forget dot class. It is a builder spender that just happens to have dots that have higher DPET than other stuff, so you press them because they are just better. They don't actually interact with the kit in any significant way, and they feel bad because of it. Like, I can't explain it further than that. Legion Shooting Stars was just the top end of how to make the class feel great, and I think that I think that making Shooting Stars baseline without the diminishing returns is probably the best way of going about it. Maybe there's a better way that the devs could come up with, but to me, it feels like that's something that they should be definitely looking at. In addition to that, let's talk about Starfall, I guess, because while it has gotten significantly better, I literally do not think it could have gotten worse. There are still some things that could be slightly improved upon. First and foremost, not being able to stack it kind of sucks. I do understand that not all the time, like, we don't even have astral power a lot of the time to be able to drop multiple Starfalls at once. So stacking it for a large majority of the time doesn't make sense. But you can't even pandemic the duration of Starfall as it currently stands, and that feels really awkward to have to fully wait for your Starfall to drop before you press the second Starfall again. So either make it stackable to where once we do get enough haste and enough astral power generation on AoE, we are able to drop multiple Starfalls at once, or the alternative being allow us to pandemic a Starfall while it is out. Both of those things, I think, are reasonable requests of feedback, of suggestions. The reason for that is because it's really, really rough because you're going to end up wasting your damage if you accidentally overwrite the Starfall buff at all, and that it's super awkward. It's hard to explain. It just feels super awkward to play whenever you have to wait for the duration of the Starfall to expire, and then you press it again. Out of baseline stuff, we still have to talk about Eclipses. Right now, Eclipses are in a weird state where we talked about it a little bit in the single target section. They don't really do anything. I guess it's the exact same problem as that Empowerment's had, is that nothing really happens, right? So sure, we do have that crit legendary. Honestly, it's a super sick legendary. It's probably the most unique thing that they've introduced this expansion. Actually, no, Night Fae, but it's the most unique legendary that they've introduced so far. Eclipses don't really have any incentivization to extend them even further. The only incentivization is actually to make them shorter and not Star Surge in Eclipse as infrequently as possible, and try to get back to your beginning of your Eclipse cycle before you Star Surge again. It's just really awkward to play not only with the legendary, but just without the legendary in general, because you don't have any purpose in extending out your Eclipse. Sure, it may gain you a couple more astral power over the duration than not, but like then of it again doesn't really do anything, and it feels just, it doesn't flow super well all the time. I think that there should be, I don't know, there definitely is something that could occur that incentivizes further extension of Eclipses and it reward longer durations. It's just going from Eclipse to Eclipse so quickly without any downtime, and then you don't have any massive gain of being in Eclipse. It doesn't really do anything. You just, it's just there. It's just a thing. And I think that's how most people feel about it, is that it is neither good nor bad. And like, if you don't change it, honestly, that's also fine. Okie dokie. Let's talk about talents. There are actually a lot of talents that have improved significantly, and a lot of talent rows that have improved substantially during the move from Battle for Azeroth into Shadowlands. But there are still some rows, mostly the core rows of how the class plays, that are kind of awkward. First and foremost, Soul of the Forest. And Soul of the Forest got a pretty substantial rework to where now it baseline makes your Eclipse duration longer. So Soul of the Forest power is tied directly into how strong Eclipses are, and like how strong it is to extend out Eclipse as long as possible. Due to the fact that there's no current reward for extending out Eclipses longer, it really doesn't make any sense for you to ever talent Soul of the Forest. To the point where it could potentially be a 0 damage gain or even a damage loss talent. So that would be incredibly awkward if it was a 0 DPS talent because you don't have any incentivization to extend out Eclipses. So it would just be the passive, 5% haste that's on Soul of the Forest. That's all you'd be gaining, which I guess that would not be bad, but it's passive 5% haste. I think it's on Starfire and Wrath. I don't even think it's actually on the abilities. So Stellar Drift and Twin Moons, we're going to lump these together because they suffer a very similar identity crisis being on the same row as one another, and they interact with one another in a way that most other talents don't because they're on the same row. Basically, they cannot coexist within the same balance of duration is the fundamental issue. And then if Starfall is good, Stellar Drift is almost always picked. And then if Starfall is bad or Moonfire is super, super sick, then Twin Moons will almost always be picked. Both of these talents are like a core foundation on what balance is built off of on AoE. Like being able to get out Moonfires in a quick amount, or alternative is like bigger Starfall duration, being able to cast during Starfall, stuff like that. Those two things are like huge for balance AoE, and having to pick between one of the two of them kind of sucks. I don't think that there is a great way of doing it. But right now, it does feel really bad to not be talenting into Twin Moons currently because Stellar Drift is so good. And then all of BFA, I don't think anybody ever fucking talented Stellar Drift, but Stellar Drift is still such a sick talent. It's really, really rough to have those talents on the exact same row because whenever Moonfire is not good, like right now, it's doubly not good because you're never going to be able to take Twin Moons, and it's just like the same. It's the counter problem that current BFA Moonkin has, where they can't ever take Stellar Drift because Starfall's so bad. All right, Shooting Stars, and honestly, this whole entire row is got like it's had problems for such a long time. Shooting Stars is very underwhelming as a whole, especially due to the fact that it has diminishing returns on increased targets. That in of itself is a huge issue, and I think that for a lot of players, it makes a lot of sense where Shooting Stars is the AoE talent, New Moon is a single target talent, and then Fury Balloon is the burst DPS talent. Good on burst AoE, good on burst single target. It's actually somewhere in the middle on both. Shooting Stars should absolutely be the AoE talent right now, though, and it should be the fix to our AoE generation of Astral Power, and honestly, be way more than 2 Astral Power per tick. Some of my best memories of balance are like the Lower Karazhan or the Eye of Ashara pulls, where you just hit the mobs with a Sunfire and you just spam Starfall global over global. And those were just the most fun times I had. It was so sick, and I loved it. So that's how I feel about Shooting Stars. It's really underwhelming. Honestly, it should probably be our AoE go-to on that row. And with that said, moving into New Moon, dude, I cannot express enough how many times people talk about wanting New Moon back. I personally don't care, but just the uproar that people have for moons, and honestly, looking at the, level 60 row, moons should be, or maybe it's level 50, whatever that row is, moons should be the single target option. It shouldn't be Fury of Balloon or Shooting Stars. Like, I think this one's pretty easy. Moons currently are just arcane, and thus they don't work with both sides of Eclipse. And in addition, they don't double dip whenever you're in your cooldowns. So if you made Moons astral damage, it would stay consistent with the rest of the row. Both Fury of Luna and Shooting Stars are also astral damage, and allows Moons to be castable in both Eclipse states. I think that is definitely in of itself a problem for Moons, and it's not really intuitive for a lot of players because players don't understand the difference between astral, arcane, and nature damage. Basically, astral is both spell schools. It's arcane and nature, meaning that it's going to double dip and make you do increased damage from your Star Surge, your Starfall, and then stuff like Fury of Luna and Shooting Stars are both astral damage. In addition to that, looks like Full Moon is using the Legion formula for splash damage as opposed to the new formula for Shadowlands splash damage, making it weaker on AoE than it should be. This is probably just due to how it was implemented whenever it was originally created. Oh my goodness, if I can speak. Meaning that the old splash formula should it should get a slight buff on AoE, but for Moonkin and identity-wise, it seems like it would make the most sense if Shooting Stars is the AoE talent, Fury of Luna is the burst talent, and then New Moon is like the patchwork single-target talent for Balanced Druid. And somewhere along those lines, making it to where that those would feel the best for those situations would be a great surprise and great rejoice for Moonkin players. Okay, so let's get into Legendaries and give a little bit of feedback on those, since those are the most recent thing to be added. First and foremost, we have the Unnamed Critical Strike Legendary. Honestly, this Legendary front loads almost all of our damage inside of Eclipse windows and makes certain covenants convoke significantly weird to use. It also devalues haste and crit by a substantial amount, and it makes us want to Starfall on single target because you don't want to Star Surge to extend your Eclipse. You want to basically cycle Eclipses as quickly as possible, meaning that you avoid extension just as much as you humanly can. That in of itself, it probably has a fundamental design problem where it should be looked at. Maybe it has the Chorus of Insanity thing where you get more value the longer you go into it. Maybe there's some other route they could take. It's a very interesting legendary. I think that as it currently stands, it front loads your crit a little bit too much. All right, Oneth's Clear Vision, aka Oneth's Intuition. It's a pretty watered down version of its Legion Glory days. Basically, in Legion, especially at the end of Legion, we generated about 11.5 astral power per second, and in current Shadowlands, we're right at 5.7. So it feels way worse than what it used to be back in the Legion Glory days. In addition to that, nerfing the proc chance by 25% just does not feel great. It feels really rough, and then on top of all of that, you tack on a duration of when you have to spend the OI proc to 15 seconds, which I understand maybe Blizzard does not want you getting OI procs pre-dungeon, pre-boss fight, whatever. 15 seconds is you lose that shit running from trash pack to trash pack in Mythic Plus. If you proc it off the last Star Surge on a pack, you just lose that proc. It's awful. And on top of that, you want to know something that's hilarious? The new generic legendary that was added, Lycara's Fleeting Glimpse. Every 45 seconds while in combat, you cast a spell based on your form. For Moonkin form, that's Starfall. Lycara's Fleeting Glimpse gives you more Starfalls, or basically OI procs than Oneth's Intuition does. So there's a lot going on with OI that needs to be looked at. And so I hope that they do take a gander at that. Emerald Dreamcatcher, aka Time Worn Dreamcatcher, same thing. Honestly, whenever people talked about bringing back ED, the part of Emerald Dreamcatcher that they wanted brought back in this Time Warp Dreamcatcher was the Star Surge machine gun style of Legion. It was not the hybrid style rotation. They wanted it to be something that was more distinct. And right now, it's basically the same effect as OI. There's no clear niche between Oneth's Clear Vision and Time Worn Dreamcatcher. It's basically the same thing. On top of that, it's really hard to keep the buff up with our current generation speed, especially if you ever press Starfall. Like there's almost no way to be able to keep the buff up of Time Worn Dreamcatcher. So there's a lot going on with that as well. Both Oneth's Clear Vision and Time Worn Dreamcatcher need tuning changes to where they feel substantially better. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get an Impeccable Fell Essence or like a Echoing Stars legendary. I think that was kind of a miss in the Time Worn Dreamcatcher. But as a middle ground, we can take what we can. We just take what we can get. Time Worn Dreamcatcher and Oneth Clear Vision need a little bit of tweaking and a little bit more distinction in terms of their identity. Primordial Arcanic Pulsar. Honestly, I don't think I have too many problems with it. Like currently it's bugged, but basically if you proc the Arcanic Pulsar while you're in an Eclipse state, you don't get the Celestial Alignment buff, and instead it just cancels out your Eclipse and you don't get the CA. Basically you get nothing, and you actually end up losing your Eclipse, which is not great. But Primordial Arcanic Pulsar in of itself, let's push that to the side. I think it's a really good legendary and a great addition. Last but not least, I'm looking at you, Covenant abilities. First and foremost, we have Convoke the Spirits, which is Night Fae's Covenant. Honestly, it's so good on single target, and it is by far the most satisfying button to press that I think I've ever seen, and it's great. One problem that I have with it, and this is like a great feedback, is that it should prioritize casting Star Surge and your abilities into your primary target, or at least not cast part of the Convoke into either CC'd or immune targets, because I've had it where it'll cast part of the Convoke and a bunch of Star Surges into both CC and immune targets, and I'm like, holy shit, please stop immediately before I scream. It feels really awful whenever that happens. Convoke should prioritize the Star Surges and stuff on your priority target. Honestly, I'm fine with it, like, dotting up. I'm fine with it dotting up targets that aren't targeted. Same with, like, Thrash and stuff. It's the most satisfying button to press. I think there should be some nuance to playing around it with terms of range and, like, HP of when you cast it and whatnot. But, like, damn, dude, please stop casting that into immune targets. Next, Adaptive Swarm. Please no? Like, I don't know how to explain it beyond that. What it says on this feedback that the Balanced TC community wrote, it has no target scaling beyond 2 targets, and its power is tied to our dot damage, meaning that's not a very good ability for this class at this time. Currently, best case scenario is single target Adaptive Swarm with Stellar Flare, meaning you have 3 dots that will amp up, but even then it's like not good, and it is just an unfun button to press. Like, to the point where whenever people ask me how I feel about our covenants, and I'm like, you better hope that Venthyr or Night Fae are our covenants of choice and not Necrolord or Kyrian. Otherwise, you're going to feel very upset, because Adaptive Swarm, which is the Necrolord one, is like, it feels really bad to play. I don't know how to explain it beyond it feels really bad to play because it's tied to our dots. Balance isn't really a dot class in the same way that even Feral is, so it feels really rough for Moonkin. All right, Kyrian, which is Kindred Spirits. The value of this being dependent on your bonded partner, meaning that it depends on which specs you're playing with, can either make your Kyrian ability extremely strong or nearly useless. This is not great. In addition to that, it's fairly complicated, requiring you to track cooldowns and buffs in a way that I wouldn't have problems with, but I worry that a mass populace would not know when they should be using their Kyrian ability. And it requires you to be in direct communication with others to get full benefit out of it. The downside is that you don't really... Is that, like... So say it's permanently undertuned, there's no real situation for it to be good. And on the other side, though, it also suffers from the same thing that Necrolord and Adaptive Swarm, is that it just doesn't feel great to press. Like, the alternative is Convoke or Ravenous Frenzy, which both feel great to press. Kindred, like, okay, sure, it is a damage gain. There's something that's just not satisfying about it, though. I think it's that you're attached to a partner, I think is part of the problem, but it's just not satisfying to press. Last but not least, Venthyr, which is Ravenous Frenzy. For a 3-minute cooldown, it's kind of underwhelming. But at the same time, the fact that it lines up with your Celestial alignment makes it feel pretty good. Like being global capped towards the end of Ravenous Frenzy feels really nice, especially on AoE. It's not the most useful thing on single target, but whenever you are in these mass AoE situations, whenever you pair it up with your Incarn or your Celestial alignment, it feels really good as a button to press. I do think the output, once you get global capped, it doesn't really do too much. But honestly, it feels like a pretty good button to press, especially relative to Adaptive Swarmers or Kindred Spirits. So that's going to be that for Covenant abilities. So in conclusion, honestly, I think Moonkin is in a significantly better state going into Shadowlands than it was going into Battle for Azeroth, and I am looking forward to playing Moonkin come Shadowlands. Again, I think that the most important things to hit are our dots and our multi-target astral power generation. There are a couple things with like legendaries and covenants that also need to be addressed as well, but if those things get shored up, I think balance is looking like one of the best classes in the game, and I'm very, very excited to be able to play it long term going into Shadowlands. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys for the next video. I'm going to leave a link down in the description where you can check out this Google document. Also, link to the post on the forums if you have any experience playing balanced Druid on the Shadowlands beta. Give your anecdotal experience. Talk about what you think could be improved. Just give it enough experience so that the devs can change a couple more things and move Moonkin from above average or good to great. And I hope that that's what was expressed here. I didn't want this video to be a downer. I actually think Moonkin's in a pretty good spot, and I'm looking forward to playing it. And I will see you guys later. Peace out.